Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a really monumental intellectual plunge. We're going on a foundational journey into what is basically modern philosophy.
We are. We're tackling René Descartes' seminal work, The Meditations on First Philosophy.
And this is not just a book you sort of casually read, is it? It feels more like an instruction manual for your own mind.
That's a great way to put it. It's a cognitive training exercise. Descartes actually structured it as a systematic 6-day retreat for the mind.
A 6-day retreat, I like that.
Exactly. And our mission today is to move through these 6 meditations, just like the meditator himself did. We want to extract the core arguments and, maybe more importantly, understand why these ideas were so devastating to the intellectual system that came before them.
I think so many people know the phrase, "I think, therefore I am," but it's often just a slogan, right? If you've ever felt overwhelmed by that but really wanted to understand the logical scaffolding built around it, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Right. And you have to remember the context. This work, published in 1641, wasn't just philosophy in a vacuum. It was, in a way, revolutionary science advocacy.
So he had a clear agenda.
Oh, absolutely. Descartes had 2 primary, very explicitly stated goals, and they dictate the entire structure of the work. First, he wanted to prove the existence of God using only natural reason.
No faith required, just logic.
Just logic.
Yeah.
And second, to establish the real distinction, what we now call Cartesian dualism, between the human mind, or soul, and the body.
And he was not shy about his ambitions. I mean, he dedicated the work to the Sorbonne, which was the leading theological faculty in Paris at the time.
It was a power move. He was essentially daring them, challenging them to declare his arguments demonstrative. He genuinely believed he could make the truths of religion, which often rested on faith, as certain as a mathematical proof.
And who is he targeting with this?
He says it's for the unbelievers, those who denied God or the idea that the soul was distinct from the body. He wanted to prove these things using reason alone.
The method he uses is so important to the experience of reading it. It's not just a list of proofs.
No, and that was a very deliberate choice. He chose what's called the analytic method. It's a narrative that traces the actual thought processes of discovery. He wanted you to feel the doubt and then feel the certainty.
As opposed to the synthetic method.
Right, which would be just laying out dry geometric proofs. He does that later in the replies to the objections that were published with the book, but for the main event, he wants you to come along for the ride.
So, to get the most out of this, you really have to follow his lead. He asks readers to discard all their prejudices and experience the discoveries right alongside him.
To withdraw their minds from the senses entirely. It's a radical kind of reflexivity. The focus shifts completely inward. You're not looking at the objects you perceive, but at the self that's doing the perceiving.
Okay, so before we can build anything, we have to clear the ground completely. We have to be prepared to question absolutely everything.
That's the goal of the first meditation. It's not to make you a skeptic for life, but to prepare your mind. It's like clearing all the debris and rubble from a site before you pour a massive, unshakable concrete foundation.
Okay, let's start the demolition process. So the meditator, who is Descartes, begins by recognizing that he's believed a lot of false things in his life.
And because of that, he resolves that just once in his life, he has to tear everything down, everything, and then rebuild all his knowledge on a truly unshakable foundation.
He needs to find that one single, indubitable truth.
And he starts gently. He doesn't jump straight into the deep end. The first stage of doubt is about our sensory input.
Right. He makes the very reasonable point that the senses sometimes deceive us.
Exactly. If you see a tower in the distance and it looks perfectly round, but when you get closer, you see that it's actually square. Well, your senses have misled you. It's a simple, undeniable fact.
But he himself admits this is a pretty slight reason for doubt. I mean, okay, my vision might be a bit fuzzy for things far away, but that doesn't make me doubt that I'm sitting in this chair right now, or that I'm holding this script.
Of course. That seems immediately certain, and that's what leads him to the second and much more profound stage of doubt, the dream argument.
This is the one that really messes with your head.
It does. He asks, how can I be absolutely certain that I can distinguish my current waking state from an incredibly vivid dream?
And his answer is, you can't.
He argues there are no conclusive indications. Every single sensation you're having right now, the feeling of the chair, the sight of the room, the sound of my voice, could in theory be a hallucination that's happening while you're asleep in bed.
That's philosophically devastating.
Yeah.
Because if you accept that possibility, you're forced to suspend judgment on all of concrete external reality.
Your body, the laws of physics, geography, all of it. If you can't be certain you even have a body, you have to treat that idea as potentially false.
But even Descartes finds a limit to this argument, right? He doesn't stop there.
No, he reflects that even in our wildest dreams, the complex images we see must be built from something real. A griffin, for example, is just a combination of a lion and an eagle.
They're like painted images, he says. They're formed from a resemblance to real, general things. Dreams have to use some basic building blocks.
Exactly. Things like basic shapes, colors, the idea of extension in space, number, these seem to be the fundamental components of reality.
So, okay, fields like physics or medicine, which study complex things like a human body, they might be doubtful because a body could be a dream.
But maybe, just maybe, the simpler things remain certain, things like pure mathematics and geometry.
Right, 2 plus 3 equals 5. That seems to be true whether I'm awake or I'm dreaming.
It seems to be. And this is where Descartes pushes beyond any skepticism that came before him. This is the moment he introduces the third and final stage of doubt, hyperbolic doubt.
The evil genius.
The evil genius. He asks, what if the source of my very existence isn't a good and benevolent God, but a supremely powerful and cunning evil demon, or a deceitful God who spends all his energy manipulating my entire cognitive system?
So now we're not just doubting our senses, which is, understandable. We are doubting the fundamental trustworthiness of reason itself.
Yes. Could this evil genius be so powerful that he could trick me into believing that 2 plus 3 is 5, even if it were false? Could he make me go wrong on the thing that seems most certain to me?
And for the sake of the method, Descartes says we have to assume, just for now, that this is the case.
We must. And it's important to understand this is a highly disciplined methodological step. He knew his critics, people like Thomas Hobbes, would say he was just rehashing old Pyrrhonian skepticism.
But he had a different goal.
He insisted this radical step was altogether necessary. It's the only way to flesh out every single prejudice you hold. It's the only way to make sure that whatever conclusion you eventually reach is absolutely firm and stable.
So the goal isn't to live your life believing in an evil genius. That would be insane.
Not at all. It's a theoretical tool. It's to achieve absolute certainty in speculation. He's very careful to separate the conduct of life, where of course we have to rely on our senses to survive, from the pure pursuit of scientific knowledge.
So that final doubt about mathematics, he calls it very slight and, so to speak, metaphysical.
It's a tiny hook, but as long as it's there, nothing is truly certain. Until he can settle the question of God's existence and nature, that hook of metaphysical doubt remains. Everything now hangs on finding one thing that can resist even the evil deceiver.
Okay, so after the total demolition in the first meditation, the meditator is lost. He's in a whirlpool of doubt. He needs his one solid point of certainty.
His Archimedean point. Archimedes said he could move the earth if he just had one firm and immovable point to stand on. Descartes is looking for the philosophical equivalent.
So he supposes everything is false. His body, the idea of extension, his memories, all external things are just illusions created by the evil genius.
But then he has the breakthrough. If he is being deceived about all of these things, what must necessarily be true?
That he exists to be deceived.
Exactly. This is the famous cogito discovery. The deceiver can manipulate the content of his thoughts, making him think he sees a tree when there is none, but the deceiver cannot manipulate the brute fact that thought is occurring.
He writes, "Beyond doubt, then, I also exist if he is deceiving me. And he can deceive me all he likes, but he will never bring it about that I should be nothing as long as I think I am something."
And that gives him his first, and at this stage only, immediate certainty. This proposition, I am, I exist, whenever it is uttered by me or conceived in the mind, is necessarily true.
This single piece of knowledge, this cognition as he calls it, is completely immune to the evil genius.
It is the foundation.
But then he has to ask, okay, what is this I that exists? He has to define himself, but he can only use what he knows for certain.
Which means he has to reject the traditional definitions. The classical definition of man was rational animal, but that's full of concepts like animal and body, which are now in the doubt pile.
So he strips everything away. He can't be sure he has a body or that he can move or that he takes in nutrition. All of that was thrown out with the dream argument.
And what's left?
Only thinking. He is a res cogitans, a thinking thing.
And it's worth pausing on what thinking means for Descartes, because it's much, much broader than how we use the word today.
It's not just intellectual calculation.
Not at all. It's basically all conscious experience. For Descartes, thinking includes doubting, understanding, affirming, denying, willing, refusing, but also imagining, and even the sensation.
Wait, sensation? How can sensation be part of thinking if he's doubting the senses?
Because even if the sensation of heat is being caused by an imaginary fire created by the evil genius, the internal experience of seeming to feel heat is an undeniable immediate event happening in his consciousness.
Ah, so it's a modification of the thinking substance. The feeling itself is a thought, regardless of its cause.
Precisely. Every conscious experience, whether it's true or false about the external world, is absolutely certain insofar as it is an act of the mind.
And this leads him directly into one of the most famous thought experiments in all of philosophy.
The wax example.
Mm.
This is the moment where Descartes fundamentally inverts 2,000 years of Aristotelian philosophy, which always held that we know the world primarily through our senses.
Okay, let's break down the wax. The meditator imagines taking a piece of fresh beeswax. It has a specific taste of honey, a certain scent, a particular color and shape, and if you tap it, it makes a sound.
All qualities delivered by the senses, but then he brings it close to a fire.
And every single one of those sensible qualities changes. The taste is gone, the scent vanishes, the color changes, the shape melts into a puddle, and it no longer makes a sound when you strike it.
And yet we all know, without a doubt, that it is the same piece of wax.
So the meditator asks the killer question. How do I know this? How do I know it's the same wax? It can't be through my senses, because my senses are now reporting completely different, almost opposite information.
And it can't be through his imagination either. His imagination can conjure up a few possible shapes the melted wax could take, but it can't possibly run through the literally infinite number of shapes it could take.
So if it's not the senses and not the imagination, what's left?
The knowledge that the wax remains the same wax, that it is simply a continuous, extended, flexible thing, is grasped by the intellect alone. It's an act of pure understanding.
Wow, the implication of that is huge.
It's profound. He's arguing that our knowledge of external physical things, even their most basic enduring properties like extension and flexibility, is perceived not because they are seen or touched, but because they are understood.
So all knowledge of the physical world is fundamentally intellectual, not sensory. The senses just provide raw, confused data.
And if that's true, then the understanding itself, the mind, must be more accessible, more certain, and more easily known than any of the external objects it understands.
This is the big takeaway from the second meditation. He concludes that nothing can be perceived more easily or more clearly than my own mind.
By using this radical doubt to strip away the body, he's actually secured the certainty and the primacy of the mind, completely independent of the physical world. And that is his unshakable foundation.
So the meditator has his one certain point. I exist as a thinking thing. That's the bedrock. Now he has to figure out how to build on it.
He needs to generalize this certainty. He looks back at the Cogito and asks, what was it about that perception that made it so certain? And he concludes it was its clarity and distinctness.
So he establishes his general rule, his criterion for all truth. Whatever I very clearly and distinctly perceive is true.
But there's a problem. Why can't he just stop there and start rebuilding science based on that rule?
The evil genius.
The shadow of the evil genius still looms. That metaphysical doubt still threatens even the clearest and most distinct perception. For all he knows, 2 + 3 = 5 might seem clear and distinct only because a deceiver is making it seem so.
So until he can prove that God exists and that God is not a deceiver, he's stuck.
He's stuck. So the urgent task of the third meditation is to look inward, to survey the contents of his own mind, his ideas, and see if any of them logically require the existence of something outside of his mind.
And he starts by categorizing his ideas, trying to figure out where they come from.
Right. He proposes 3 possible sources. Some ideas seem to be innate, just born in him, like the idea of himself. Others are adventitious, appearing to come from outside, like the feeling of heat from a fire. And finally, some are fictitious or invented by him, like a siren or a hippogriff.
And to analyze these, he introduces a really important principle, the causal argument, which is sometimes called the trademark argument.
It's based on an axiom that he says is evident by the natural light of reason. There must be at least as much reality in the total and efficient cause as in its effect.
Okay, that makes sense for, a physical thing. You can't get a hot fire from a cold match. But he's talking about ideas. This is where it gets a little abstract.
It does. We need to be really clear on the distinction he makes between formal reality and objective reality.
Right, let's break that down.
Formal reality is the actual real-world existence of a thing. A stone has formal reality. You and I have formal reality. It's the reality of a substance or its mode.
Okay, simple enough. What about objective reality?
Objective reality is the reality of the thing as it is represented in the idea. Think of it like a blueprint for a skyscraper. The blueprint itself is just paper and ink. That's its formal reality. But its objective reality is the entire complex skyscraper that it represents.
Ah, okay. So the objective reality is the representational content of an idea.
Exactly. And the causal principle applies to objective reality too. The cause of an idea must contain, either formally or eminently, at least as much reality as the idea contains objectively.
What does eminently mean there?
It means in a higher or greater form. For instance, the idea of a stone, which is a finite substance, could be caused by an actual stone, which has the formal reality of finite substance. Or it could be caused by me, the meditator. I don't have the formal reality of a stone, but as a thinking substance, I have a higher degree of reality, so I contain the reality of a stone eminently.
Okay, I think I'm with you. So the meditator then searches his mind for an idea that has so much objective reality that he, a finite, doubting, imperfect being, could not possibly be its cause.
And he finds one, the idea of God.
He defines this idea as an infinite substance, eternal, infinite, omniscient, all-powerful, and the creator of everything.
This idea, he argues, contains a superior grade of objective reality than any idea he has of himself or any other finite thing. It contains the objective reality of infinite perfection.
And here's the crucial logical leap. He, a finite substance, could not have generated this idea just by mashing together or amplifying his own finite qualities.
Right. Infinity isn't just a really, really big version of the finite. It's a qualitatively different and superior kind of being. You can't get the idea of infinite perfection by just negating your own imperfections.
So the objective reality contained in the idea of God requires an actually existing infinite substance God as its formal cause. The idea is like a trademark that the creator has stamped onto his creation.
The meditator, being finite, simply could not be the origin of this idea. Therefore, God must exist.
What I find fascinating here is the realization he has about the priority of the infinite. It feels counterintuitive.
It really is. He notes that he can only recognize his own nature. The fact that he doubts, that he desires, that he is imperfect, because he already possesses the idea of a more perfect being to compare himself to.
So I can't know that I'm lacking something unless I already have a concept of the perfection that I'm lacking.
Exactly. So the perception of the infinite God must be prior to that of the finite, the self. I can't know I'm imperfect unless that standard of perfection is already part of my consciousness.
You also mentioned another argument in this meditation, the argument from conservation. How does that work?
It's a secondary causal proof that reinforces the first. He asks, what is causing me to exist right now, in this very moment, and what caused me to exist a moment ago?
He's saying that his existence needs to be conserved from instant to instant.
Precisely. And he realizes he doesn't have the power to do that himself. If he had the power to create and sustain himself, he would have made himself perfect. He would be God.
So his continued existence requires an external, infinite, and omnipotent sustaining cause.
And that cause must be God. So through two distinct internal causal arguments, God's existence is secured. And because God is by definition supremely perfect, perfection cannot include deception. Therefore, God is no deceiver, and the evil genius hypothesis is finally defeated.
So the evil genius is gone. God exists and is not a deceiver, which means the meditator can now trust his clear and distinct perceptions.
The foundation is secure. But a new paradox immediately emerges, a really difficult one.
Which is, if God is supremely perfect and created me and gave me my faculty of judgment, why do I make mistakes all the time?
Exactly. If my faculties come from a perfect source, shouldn't my judgment be infallible? How can a perfect creator produce an imperfect, error-prone creation?
This seems like a major problem for his system.
It does, and Descartes resolves it by first defining error, not as a positive thing that God created, but as a purely and simply a deficiency. It's a privation,
A lack of something.
a lack of a perfection that he feels he should have. He says the meditator is a medium term, a middle ground between God, the supreme being, and nothingness, or non-being.
So insofar as I am created by God, my faculties are perfect. But insofar as I participate in nothingness, I'm finite, and I lack perfections. And that lack is the root of error.
But he gets more specific. He says that error is rooted in the interplay between two specific faculties that God gave him, the intellect and the will.
Okay, how do they work together to produce error?
Well, the intellect is the faculty for acquiring knowledge. It provides us with ideas. And our intellect is finite and imperfect. It gives us some ideas that are clear, but many that are obscure and confused.
And the will?
The will is the faculty of choosing, or free will. And here's the key. For Descartes, the will is infinite in its scope. It's not limited like the intellect. It can assent to anything.
So the mechanism of error is basically the infinite will overreaching the bounds of the finite intellect.
You've got it. The will judges and assents to matters that the intellect does not yet clearly and distinctly perceive.
A decision on the part of the will should always be preceded by a perception on the part of the intellect. That's the rule.
That's the rule for avoiding error. When your will jumps ahead and affirms or denies an idea that is still unclear in your understanding, that misuse of your freedom is the error.
So this is brilliant because it places all accountability for error on us. The error is an act of free choice, which comes from us, not a flaw in the faculty itself, which comes from God.
Exactly. God is off the hook. But this raises a very practical question, one that his critics brought up immediately.
Which is, if I can only assent to what is perfectly clear and distinct, how can I possibly function in everyday life? I'd be paralyzed, right? Clarity is so rare.
It's a very fair challenge. And Descartes' response is to clarify the scope of the meditations.
Yeah.
This incredibly strict rule withholding assent is essential only for the attainment of speculative knowledge. This is about building a foundation for science.
Not about deciding what to have for lunch.
Precisely. He says this investigation is not with action, but only with the attainment of knowledge. In the conduct of life, as he calls it, we often have to make choices based on probabilities and inclinations because waiting for perfect certainty would be impossible.
So there's a different standard for philosophy and for daily life.
Yes. And he adds one more perspective shift here, a kind of cosmic one. He says that what seems imperfect when we judge it in isolation, like my finite, error-prone mind, might actually be completely perfect if considered as a part of the universe.
My capacity for error might be a necessary part of the grand design.
It's possible. We have to judge God's work as a whole, not by its individual, seemingly imperfect parts. All right, so with God now secured as the guarantor of truth, the meditator can finally start to turn his attention back to the material world.
He still hasn't proven that physical bodies actually exist, but he wants to see if he can at least establish a clear and distinct idea of their nature, their essence.
And he finds that he does have a clear, innate idea of the essence of matter. He describes it as continuous quantity occupying three-dimensional space.
So basically, the entire subject matter of pure mathematics and geometry, shape, size, position, motion.
Exactly. And he makes a crucial point here. These ideas are not arbitrary inventions of his mind. They have true and immutable natures.
What does that mean, an immutable nature?
Well, when he thinks about a triangle, for instance, he discovers certain properties like the fact that its three angles must sum to 180 degrees. He didn't invent that property. It's necessary and eternal. He just recognizes it.
So the nature of a triangle is independent of his mind.
Correct. And this idea of immutable natures is the setup for his second proof of God's existence.
The ontological argument. The argument from essence.
Right. The first proof in Meditation 3 was a causal argument, moving from the effect, the idea of God, to the cause, God himself. This one moves directly from the essence of God to his necessary existence.
So how does it work?
The meditator recognizes that he has in his mind the idea of God as a supremely perfect being. He then inspects the necessary properties that belong to this essence, just like he inspected the properties of a triangle.
And he finds that eternal existence must be one of those properties.
Each existence is one of the perfections. So a supremely perfect being that did not exist would be a contradiction in terms. It would be lacking of perfection.
So for God, and only for God, existence is inseparable from his essence, just as having three sides is inseparable from the essence of a triangle.
It's like trying to conceive of a mountain without a valley. It involves an obvious contradiction. Therefore, God must exist.
Now, this argument has been historically very controversial, hasn't it? It feels a bit like you're just defining something into existence.
It is hugely controversial. Critics say it's just a logical trick. But Descartes was aware of this and insisted his version was different. He argued it only works because of the unique, necessary, and immutable nature of the supremely perfect being. For any other thing, you can separate its essence from its existence. You can think of a unicorn without it having to exist.
But not God. Because existence is part of the very definition of a perfect being.
It's one of the perfections that must belong to that essence. By offering two totally different proofs, the causal and the ontological, he's trying to build an ironclad case from multiple logical angles.
And what's the ultimate upshot of this meditation? What does it achieve for his project?
It solidifies the entire structure of knowledge. Because God is now proven, twice, to be real and non-deceiving, the meditator can finally trust all of his clear and distinct perceptions,
Even the ones he isn't actively thinking about right now.
especially those. This is where he finally secures what he calls scientia, or scientific knowledge. Before this, he only had cognitio momentary certainty.
I remember you mentioned this distinction. An atheist can have cognitio of a geometric proof while they're looking at it.
Right, but according to Descartes, they can't have scientia. Because as soon as they stop thinking about it, the old metaphysical doubt, what if my memory is flawed, what if my reason is untrustworthy, can creep back in.
But for the meditator, God is the guarantor. God is the necessary hinge that ensures his cognitive faculties are reliable over time.
God is what elevates momentary certainty into stable, reliable scientific knowledge.
Mm.
And in doing so, he secures the very possibility of science itself. Okay, we've arrived at the final meditation. There are two big tasks left on the to-do list. Establish the real distinction between the mind and the body, and finally, prove the existence of the external world.
And he starts this process by making a subtle distinction between imagination and pure intellection.
A very important one. He defines intellection as the mind simply gazing on one of the ideas that are contained within itself. It's pure understanding. Imagination, on the other hand, requires a particular mental effort and seems to involve turning toward the body.
He uses the example of a chiliagon, right? A thousand-sided figure.
The famous example. I can clearly and distinctly understand the definition of a chiliagon. My intellect grasps it perfectly, but I cannot form a distinct mental image of it. If I try to imagine it, all I get is a vague, blurry shape that looks no different from a 900-sided figure.
So the fact that he can understand it without being able to imagine it proves they are two different faculties.
And it suggests that imagination is not essential to his thinking self. It seems to be tied to something distinct from his mind's essence, namely a body.
And this leads him to the formal argument for dualism, the famous mind-body distinction.
The real distinction. The argument is actually quite straightforward once all the groundwork is laid. He says, since I can clearly and distinctly conceive of myself as a substance whose entire nature is just thinking a non-extended thing.
And I can, conversely, clearly and distinctly conceive of a body as a substance whose entire nature is just extension a non-thinking thing.
Then God, who is omnipotent and non-deceiving, could create them as two separate, distinct things. And if God can create them separately, then they are really distinct substances.
So the mind is a thinking substance. The body is an extended substance. And he says they share nothing whatever in common.
And this is the exact point where, for centuries, the philosophical community has raised a huge objection. It's called the interaction problem.
It seems like a pretty obvious question. If the mind and body are so utterly different, with nothing in common, how on earth do they causally influence each other?
Right. How can an immaterial thought, which has no location or extension, cause a massive physical arm to move? It seems impossible.
Critics like Antoine Arnauld brought this up immediately.
They did. And Descartes' response was somewhat pragmatic, you could say. He basically argued in the replies that experience shows it takes place. We just know they interact. He said we have a basic notion of our soul and body as interacting. He couldn't fully explain the mechanics of how, but he held firm to the reality of the distinction based on his clear and distinct perception.
Okay, so that's the distinction. How does he finally get to the proof for the existence of the external world?
This relies very heavily on God's non-deceiving nature. He starts by noting that he has a passive faculty of sensation. He receives ideas, sounds, colors, feelings of pain, and they often come to him against his will.
If you burn your ham, the feeling of pain intrudes whether you want it to or not.
Exactly. So this passive faculty of receiving ideas requires an active faculty somewhere to produce them. And that active faculty can't be inside him, the meditator, because sensation often happens without any intellection. And he has no conscious control over it.
So the cause of his sensations must be some substance external to him.
It has to be. And since God is no deceiver, and God has given the meditator a strong propensity to believe that these ideas are conveyed by bodily things, it follows that bodily things exist.
It would be a form of deception if God gave us this powerful natural inclination to believe in an external world if one didn't actually exist.
That's the argument. But he adds a very important qualification. Do these bodies exist exactly as our senses perceive them, with all their colors, tastes, and smells?
And the answer is no.
No. He says sensory apprehension is often very obscure and confused. The only thing he can be absolutely certain of is that bodies exist insofar as they possess the properties he clearly and distinctly understands their mathematical properties.
Extension, shape, motion, the stuff of physics.
Exactly. As for the confused secondary qualities like color or pain, their primary role is purely practical. Sensation is there for the preservation of the composite, the mind-body union. It's there to teach us to avoid things that cause pain and pursue things that cause pleasure. It's a survival mechanism, not a tool for discovering the ultimate nature of reality.
And so, at the very end, he can finally dismiss the doubt that started this whole journey, the dream hypothesis.
Yes. Now that he's armed with a trustworthy intellect, a reliable memory, and the guarantee of a non-deceiving God, he can assert that there is a massive difference between being awake and dreaming.
His waking experiences are consistent. They can be combined by my memory with the rest of the actions of my life without any gaps.
Whereas dreams are disjointed and lack that coherence. The whole journey of doubt is finally complete. The hyperbolic doubts that seemed so powerful at the beginning are now revealed to be, in his words, ridiculous once the proper foundation for knowledge is secured. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow, what an incredible intellectual marathon. It's amazing to follow that chain of reasoning from start to finish.
It really is. We've gone from the absolute ground zero of universal doubt, and from there, Descartes has built a complete intellectual edifice.
He secures the self with the cogito,
Proves a non-deceiving God not once, but twice.
establishes the real distinction between mind and body, and then finally reestablishes the reality of the mathematical structure of the material world.
The core conclusion, the one that really did redefine Western thought, is the primacy of the res cogitans, the thinking thing. The mind is better known than the body, and its reality is established first. It provides the philosophical, and he would argue the scientific foundation for all other knowledge.
We want to thank you for coming along and participating in what is, let's be honest, an extraordinarily demanding intellectual exercise. It really requires you to follow that rigor of clear and distinct perception.
And as we conclude this deep dive, it's worth reflecting on the enduring framework that Descartes created. He effectively separated the extended world of physics from the thinking world of the mind. And in doing so, he arguably allowed modern science to flourish by giving it a clear, measurable extension.
Rush us with a puzzle.
It left us with the fundamental question. If the mind and body are so fundamentally distinct, one non-extended in thinking, the other extended in non-thinking, how is it that a simple immaterial act of will still feels like it can instantly move the entire physical world? That point of interaction is where the mysteries of consciousness still reside today.